Welcome back to the Book in Minutes. Today we're digging into some source material that honestly presents a pretty challenging view on taxes and wealth.
Yeah, it definitely flips some common ideas on their head.
It does. We're looking at the history of taxes, how different groups navigate the financial system, and especially the role corporations play, all based on this particular analysis.
Right. The material suggests the usual narrative, maybe like the Robin Hood story, might not quite capture what's really going on.
Exactly. It sort of hints that understanding the rules is key.
Rules that maybe benefit some more than others. It's less history lesson, more like understanding the playbook.
Okay, so let's jump into that Robin Hood idea first. The source takes aim at it pretty directly, the whole take from the rich, give to the poor thing.
Yeah, it argues that, well, however appealing that sounds, it actually ends up backfiring on the poor and middle class.
How so? What's the argument there?
The claim is they end up bearing the brunt of taxes, while the rich, they play by different rules, basically. They aren't taxed in quite the same way.
Okay, so how did we get here? The material looks at the history, right?
It does. It points out that taxes, thinking way back, like in England and the early U.S., weren't always this permanent thing we have now.
Oh, right. They were temporary.
Yeah, typically for specific emergencies, mostly wars. The source mentions Britain fighting Napoleon, like 1799 to 1816, and the U.S. Civil War taxes, 1861 to 65.
So temporary measures for specific crises.
Exactly. Introduced, used, and then they were kind of expected to go away.
But obviously they didn't disappear forever.
Nope. That's the big shift the material focuses on. England made income tax permanent in 1874. And the U.S. did it in 1913 with the 16th Amendment.
That feels like a massive turning point.
It was huge. And the way it happened, according to the source, is pretty interesting.
How did they sell it? Especially making it permanent.
Well, the material claims it was pitched as a tax only for the wealthy. That was the strategy, get the poor and middle class on board.
Don't worry, this won't affect you. That kind of thing.
Pretty much. And the source highlights the irony there.
Which is?
That the very people who voted for it, believing it targeted the rich, eventually found themselves paying a lot more tax as the system grew.
So why did it expand beyond just the rich?
The material puts it down to what it calls the government's growing appetite for money. It draws a contrast.
A contrast between government and business incentives.
Yeah. It suggests a government department often gets rewarded for spending its budget, for growing larger, which naturally needs more funding over time.
Whereas a business is usually trying to cut costs, be efficient.
Right. Trying to spend less, generate profit, have surplus. So this inherent governmental drive for more funds, the source argues, meant taxes inevitably had to trickle down to cover the costs.
Okay, so taxes become permanent, initially aimed at the rich, but expand to cover everyone because the government needed more money.
Got it. That's the historical picture painted by the source.
So then, how did the rich react when taxes did become permanent and started hitting them? What did they do, according to this material?
This is where it gets really interesting. The source says they turned to corporations. That became their primary tool.
Corporations. Not a new idea, though.
Not at all. The material traces it back, saying wealthy people used similar structures like centuries ago for risky ventures. Think old sailing expeditions.
To limit the risk.
Yeah.
Like if the ship sank.
Exactly. You invest in one ship through a specific legal setup. If it goes down, you lose that investment, but not, your entire fortune. It contained the risk.
So protecting assets through legal structures is an old game.
Very old. And the source is quite specific about what a corporation is. It emphasizes it's not really the building or the factory.
What is it then, fundamentally?
It's a legal document, like a file folder registered with the state. It's described as a legal body, an entity, but without a soul, as the source puts it somewhat dramatically.
A legal fiction, but a powerful one.
Extremely powerful, especially, the source argues, when it comes to taxes. This is presented as maybe the biggest advantage.
Okay, let's break down that tax advantage. How does it work differently?
So the core difference highlighted is this. As an employee, you earn money. Then the government takes taxes out first, right? Through withholding.
Yeah, you get what's left over.
Right. Then you spend that leftover money. A corporation, according to this material, works the opposite way.
How so?
It earns revenue. Then it spends money on all sorts of legitimate business expenses. Then, and only then, it pays taxes on whatever profit is left over after those expenses.
Okay, so the order is crucial. Earn, spend, then tax for the corporation.
Yeah.
Versus earn, tax, then spend for the employee.
Precisely. That's the fundamental shift the source points to. It calls this a major legal tax loophole used by the wealthy.
And what kind of expenses can a corporation pay for before taxes?
Well, the source gives examples like costs for board meetings, which might involve travel or nice meals, car payments, insurance, repairs for business vehicles, health club membership sometimes, even a portion of restaurant meals if they have a clear business purpose.
Wow. So things an individual would pay for with after-tax money.
Exactly. The corporation can potentially deduct these before the tax calculation, significantly reducing the taxable income.
That's a huge difference in how much money is actually subject to tax.
It is, and the source mentions other things too, like the 1031 exchange for real estate.
That's that.
It's a legal way, described in the source, for real estate investors to basically defer paying capital gains tax when they sell a property, as long as they reinvest the money into another similar, usually more expensive property. It's about managing when tax is paid.
So using the rules legally to minimize or delay the tax hit.
That's the idea presented.
Okay, taxes are a big one. What's the other major advantage the source talks about for corporations or similar structures, like trusts?
Protection. Protection from lawsuits.
Ah, asset protection.
Yeah. The source argues this is absolutely critical today. The strategy it describes is that the wealthy use these entities, corporations, trusts, to hold their assets.
So they don't own things directly in their own name.
Kind of. They might control everything through these entities, but legally, on paper, they might own nothing personally. This makes it much harder to sue them successfully and go after their assets.
Compared to someone who owns their house, car, savings directly.
Exactly. The source contrasts that with the typical middle-class approach of trying to own everything directly, which leaves them vulnerable. If they get sued, they could potentially lose it all.
So it's a two-pronged strategy. Tax advantages and legal protection.
That's what the material strongly suggests. It frames it as the rich reacting strategically when faced with challenges like higher taxes.
They don't just, sit back and pay more.
According to the source, no. They actively use their resources, hiring smart lawyers, accountants, maybe even influencing the laws themselves through lobbying to find legal pathways to minimize the burden and protect what they have.
Which brings us to this whole concept the source pushes about financial intelligence.
Right. The idea that the rich, in this view, kind of outsmarted the system and maybe even the intellectuals who designed it because they understood money differently. They played the game smart.
And this financial intelligence or financial IQ, the source breaks it down.
Yeah, it says it's built on 4 key areas of knowledge. You need all 4, really, to play the game effectively, according to this perspective.
Okay, what are the 4 pillars?
First, accounting. This is basically financial literacy, being able to read and understand numbers, financial statements, knowing what the figures actually mean.
Makes sense. What's second?
Investing. Understanding how to make your money work for you, how to generate more money from the money you have, strategies for asset growth.
Okay. Accounting, investing. Third.
Understanding markets. This means grasping supply and demand, knowing the difference between technical market analysis like charts and market psychology, and fundamental analysis, which looks at the economic health of an investment.
And the fourth pillar. This feels crucial given what we've discussed.
Absolutely, it's the law. Specifically, understanding tax advantages, corporate law, the protections offered by these legal structures we've been talking about, corporations, trusts.
So it's the synergy of all 4.
Yes. The source suggests that knowing about accounting, investing, and markets is powerful, but deploying that knowledge within the right legal structure, like a corporation, is what really unlocks the potential for wealth building and protection described.
It really puts the legal structure front and center, not just as paperwork, but as a core strategic element.
Definitely. The material draws a sharp contrast. The path of an employee, often working hard for money, paying taxes first, giving power to the employer.
Versus someone using these principles.
Versus someone using financial intelligence and structures like corporations where their money is working for them and they maintain more control over income, expenses, and taxes.
The source had that analogy, didn't it? About the corporate ladder.
Yeah, that's a good one. Instead of just focusing all your energy on climbing the corporate ladder created by someone else.
Think about owning the ladder.
Exactly. Owning the structure itself. The material shares a story, like seeing big tax deductions on a regular paycheck and suddenly getting why the rich dad mentor figure kept emphasizing building assets inside a corporation.
Because each dollar in that asset column is working differently.
Right. It's like
Wow.
each dollar sheltered and growing within that corporate structure is an employee working 20/47 to make more dollars and doing so in a more tax-efficient way.
And without grasping the legal side, you're kind of playing with one hand tied behind your back, according to this view.
That's the strong implication. The source argues that when rules change, like higher taxes appear, the financially savvy don't just pay up, they adapt. They hire experts, find legal ways, maybe even work to change the rules again.
While others just see a bigger chunk taken out of their paycheck.
Which is why the source stresses that paying good advisors, accountants, attorneys who understand this stuff is often much less expensive in the long run than paying unnecessary taxes due to a lack of knowledge.
So the final takeaway seems to be that knowledge, especially financial and legal knowledge, is paramount. It mentions the biggest bully.
Yeah, not the boss, but the tax man, or rather the tax system. It will take as much as you let it if you don't understand how to legally structure things.
Knowledge is power, quite literally in a financial sense here.
It seems to be the central message. It's about understanding there isn't just one way money works. There are different sets of rules depending on how you're structured.
Well, this has been a fascinating dive into this source material. It definitely presents a, let's say, unconventional perspective on taxes, the power of corporations, and why financial knowledge, particularly around legal structures, is positioned as so critical.
It really does. And it's worth repeating the source's framing. This isn't advice on illegal tax evasion, but about understanding and using the legal framework, the rules of the game as they exist, which those with resources and knowledge often utilize.
It certainly leaves you thinking. The provocative question hanging in the air based on this material is, how might your financial reality change if you shifted from just earning and paying taxes to really understanding and potentially using these legal structures to build assets and manage income differently?
Yeah, it prompts you to consider, which financial game are you currently playing? And could learning more about these rules, these structures, open up a different path for you? Makes you want to dig deeper, doesn't it?